Okay, hello everybody. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about the role that managers play in building trust in the workplace. The title of the presentation, Your Employer Brand is Built on Trust, but Who Builds That Trust? And this is an important thing because when we talk about a brand being trusted, or when we talk about an employer being trusted, what exactly are we talking about? Because is it possible to trust a brand or a company, or do we trust the people who are behind that? Generally we trust people rather than things. And I think that that's very important, that when we say we trust a named brand, we are saying we trust the people behind that brand, and that's a very important thing. Okay, so we've talked about employer brand, and really the main thing that I want to say from this slide is that there's a difference between what you want to communicate to the market as your brand and the reality of the brand. And the truth always wins out. So no matter how clever your marketing or your positioning, no matter how good your communication is about what your values are or what you believe your values to be, the truth will always emerge from the market. The truth will emerge through conversations with employees. It will emerge in newspaper articles or online reviews of your organization. So your brand is really, in reality, your employer brand is only as good as the experience of the people who work for your organization have. So a couple of things from my worldview. The first is that the world's best workplaces have the best employer brands. And the reason for that is simple, that if the employees who have the best workplace experiences, by definition almost, also are working for the employers that have the best employer brand. If your employer brand sucks, it's because the employee experience is not good. And if the employee experience is good, you then have something to communicate to the market. The world's best workplaces achieve extraordinary results on every key business metric, and that's a really important thing, that this is not about being nice because it's nice to be nice. This is about being decent with people and treating them well because we all perform best and therefore we all achieve the best results when we feel comfortable and when we feel appreciated and when we feel respected. The unique advantage that these organizations have is their culture, and the basis of their culture is trust. And that applies for all of these best workplaces. There really is no exception to that. And what I'm saying here is that it's the difference between style and substance, that really any employer can create a brand that looks great. It's just a positioning thing. But the substance, the day-to-day lived experience that the employee has, and particularly this idea that every employee has a similar view of the organization. There's no point in being a great place to work for half of your people and a lousy place for the other half. Because in general, people who have a bad experience tend to be much more vocal. They tend to talk more about it than people who have a positive experience. And the key point that I want to get across today is that the people who drive the trust in your organization are your managers. Not your senior directors, not your senior executives, because for most employees, those people are people that we see from time to time and we don't interact with on a daily basis, particularly in larger organizations. And it's a cliche that people leave managers. They join companies, but they leave managers. But it's a cliche because it's true. That's the simple truth. The manager is key in all of this. If you have a good manager, then you probably will have a good workplace experience. And if you have a bad manager, you probably won't. And as I say, it matters because people join companies, but they leave managers. And what I want to talk about today is how they do it. What are the things that these managers do that drive the best workplaces? And straight away what I'll say is the disappointing news is there's nothing really surprising in anything that I'm going to talk about today. What the world's best managers do in building high trust relationships is what we all do every day in building high trust relationships with our children or our parents or our siblings, our neighbors. We're all experts at building trust because we do it already. But when we go to work, when many of us, when we go into a workplace environment, seem to feel that it takes a different set of values or a different set of behaviours to build trust with people that we work with, rather than people that we just interact with socially. Okay, a few definitions. Just a great place to work. Just when we talk about a great place to work, we talk about a high-trust workplace. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. When we talk about culture, I think of culture as being the way we do things around here. That's all that it is. And every organisation has a culture. So if you make no attempt to shape the culture will evolve anyway. And no matter what steps you take to try to shape the culture will evolve anyway. And that's very important from a HR point of view, that having statements about what it's like to work for this company or what you can expect working from us, if those statements aren't backed up by the experience that each employee has, then you've created the opportunity for mistrust from the beginning, because recruiting people into your organisation on one promise and delivering something else is a breach of trust before they really even get started in the company. I sometimes refer to culture as the deputy CEO, and from that what I mean is that the culture of the company is what takes over when the CEO is not present. Because when the CEO is present, then he or she can drive the culture and can shape the culture. But what happens when she leaves the room? And whatever happens when she leaves the room, whatever atmosphere, whatever environment there is that takes over, that's the culture of the company. And trust, just so that we're clear on it, trust is basically a firm belief in a person's reliability, truth, or ability. But it's very important to remember this point, that we trust people. You know, when we say we trust a brand or when we say we trust a company, we actually mean we trust the people behind that. And if we say we believe the promise of a brand, not just the employer brand, the consumer brand, it's because we believe the people who are behind that brand are worthy of our trust. And this idea then of best, so we know what best means, the most excellent or outstanding. And one of the things that really interests me is how many organizations say we are the best because we employ the best people. Now, I've never heard any company say we're the best because we employ the worst people. Or I've never even heard any company say we're successful despite the fact that we employ the worst people. And there's a bit of a problem here, because if best means that it's something special, and if every organization employs people who are something special, there's a bit of an imbalance there. You know, who's employing the ordinary people? And the reality is that the best companies employ ordinary people. The best companies don't employ superstars. What the best companies are great at is bringing out the best in people. So it's taking ordinary people and, you know, ordinary as in some superstars, most of us just like normal people, and making the most of us, allowing us to be the best people that we can. And again, that's where your manager comes in, because having a good manager is the key to unlocking the promise that a person has. And a bad manager is the key to locking that promise away. Because with a bad manager, we eventually just give up trying. We give up wanting to contribute. And we close ourselves off, and we simply take the money, and we think about looking for another job. So, what is a great place to work? This idea that it's hard to define, but we know it when we see it. So, if you ask the average person, what is a great place to work? In my experience, they'll give one of three answers. The first answer they'll give is they'll say, well, I don't know what a great place to work is, but this place certainly isn't one. Okay, so, and then they usually give a nervous laugh. So they'll say, well, I don't know, it's not this one. It seems to be, it goes with the territory. The other one is, occasionally people will say, well, this is a great place to work. Where I work is a great place to work. But most often what people will describe is a workplace that sounds something like this. And if you look at the screen, you'll see lots of pictures of happy, smiling people, having fun, chilling out, laying back, massage, music. There's a little ice cream van there, there's sparkling wine, probably even champagne. And the one thing that's missing, can anybody tell me what's the thing missing from this picture?
Work.
Yes, work. And that's a very important lesson to take away. You know, a great place to work, like a great place is Disneyland. Or a great, if you're into sport, a great place is watching your favorite football team. But a great place to work is something different. It's a place that we go to work, to be productive, to contribute. So is this a great place to work? This is McDonald's. So McDonald's, remember, became almost a shorthand for a bad job, you know, this idea of a Mac job. And yet McDonald's are consistently one of the best workplaces in every country in which we operate, most countries in which we operate. So how can that be? You know, it's a busy work environment. It's a place where you generally will work for minimum pay. And the reason that they're consistently one of the best workplaces, for example, is that 97% of the managers are recruited from their crew. So 1 in 34 or 35 managers is brought in from outside, but all of the other managers are grown from people who join at the bottom level. So that's one example. They are very honest about their brand promise, their employer brand promise. They're very honest about what you can expect. So you can expect to be paid, you can expect to be rostered, you can expect to flip burgers, do the cash register, and so on. They don't pretend that the work is anything other than what it is. They always say it's hard work. They give you access to personal development courses, most of which are designed to make you a more valuable employee, but it also makes you more valuable to yourself. One of the things they do in many countries is they give a thing called a Mac passport, because they understand that their employees like to travel, because they say they take people at the beginning of their career and at the end of their career. So they give young kids a Mac passport, and this is just a document that says, Bob worked in McDonald's in Dublin for 5 years, and these are the things that he can do. And with that passport, I can go to New Zealand or Australia or the UK or France, and I already have an opportunity to get a job locally because I've been vouched for by my employer. So it's little things like that, and I could talk about McDonald's for a day, but their oldest employee, for example, is 88 years of age in the UK, 88. And they recruited her when she was 83. So I don't have time to talk about them, but I could talk about them all day. Is this a great place to work? So if we think about the first picture that I showed of the holiday camp, and then we have this reality that many of the best workplaces on our lists are organizations that deal with medical emergencies, acute illnesses, people who don't get well, people who are in a severe stress situation, and the people who work there are in an equally stressful situation. The medical profession tends not to be at the nursing level, or the day-to-day care level tends not to be that paid that well. And yet, consistently, we find these healthcare centres, hospitals and so on, are named as best workplaces. So how is that? Well, it's because, again, the employer tends to acknowledge that this is a difficult job, and they tend not to make it more difficult for the people. So they try to get out of the way, make things as effortless as possible, give them professional support, allow for the fact that it's a stressful existence, and make things as easy as possible in all of the other areas. So just simple things, like if you're a nurse coming off a night shift and you find that you haven't been paid properly, that's a problem. Or you find that your application for 2 days off to go to your sister's wedding hasn't been approved yet. That's a problem. It's not the stress of the work in most cases that makes it stressful. It's the little things around it that make it more difficult. So most of you know Ireland is an island. It's a very small island, total population of about 5 million. And we have a navy which has, I think, 6 ships. And this is the biggest of them. So we are not a world naval power. But this ship was named as one of the best workplaces in Ireland. And remember, people who work in the naval service they must do what their manager tells them to do. They don't have any choice. Well, they'd be in serious trouble if they don't. So how do you lead people who must do what you tell them to do? How do you inspire them to be their best when they know that you're the boss and you have all of the power? And it comes down to personality. This ship was the best workplace when the commander was a guy called Mark Mellett. And as soon as he left, it really stopped being a great place to work because he was the one who made it great. He was the one who recognized that many of his men did not want to be at sea. They wanted to be with their families. And again, just that simple device of making things as easy as possible, treating people like human beings and seeing the full person. And the reason that I use this as an example is that many organizations think that it's much easier for everybody else to create a great place to work. So big companies say, if we were a small company, it would be easy to be a great place to work. Because I have 1,000 people. If I only had 10 people, it would be so easy. And the manager who has 10 people says, if I was a big company, I would have a proper HR function, I could have a budget, I could do things for people. Everybody thinks that it's easier for everybody else. And what I would say is that if the Eli Etna can do it, and if hospitals can do it, and if McDonald's can do it, then absolutely everybody can do it. So what is a great place to work? And this picture is similar, it's colourful, but it shows people working. So the idea is you can often tell a great place to work after just a few minutes. So Robert Levering, who was the guy who set up Great Place to Work 25 years ago, in fact it goes back longer, he was asked to write a book about great workplaces, the 100 best workplaces in America. And he actually initially refused because he didn't think that there were 100 great workplaces. He offered to write about the 100 worst workplaces. And he said, well, that could be a challenge from a legal point of view. So he set out with a list of 7 companies that he believed were good workplaces. They had a reputation as being good places to work. And he visited them and he asked who else, he interviewed managers, employees, and so on. He expected that he was going to find that the best workplaces all paid above market rates, that they had canteen facilities, maybe sport facilities, creche facilities. And what he actually found was that they had nothing in common except an atmosphere, an environment that you could tell the moment you walked into a company, within a few minutes of sitting in reception. Just you could tell by how people spoke to each other, by how people interacted with each other. Did they use first names, or did they use last names, or did they use names at all? Did some people seem to walk as if they felt they were more important than others? So this idea that you could tell a great place to work after just a few minutes, but you can also define a great place to work. And we define a great place to work, I know that you saw it already. It's from an employer's point of view, it's a workplace where people give their personal best, working together as a team in an environment of trust. And from an employee point of view, it's trust the people you work for, have pride in what you do, and enjoy the people that you work with. But the common element here is trust. That when you find a high trust workplace, you have found a great workplace. And when you find a low trust workplace, you have not found a great place to work. You cannot have a great place to work if you do not have high trust. So that's good news from one point of view. It's good news because what it says is that creating a great place to work is not about money. It's not about budgets. You don't need to spend any money to create a great place to work. You need to spend time in developing high trust relationships. And there's nothing that you can do to make a bad workplace good just by spending money. In the same way as if you have a bad relationship with your partner, or a bad relationship with your brother or your sister or a neighbor, you can buy flowers or you can give chocolates, and it might look as if you're doing something to put things right. But flowers don't make a bad relationship good. In some ways, flowers can make a bad relationship seem even worse. So if you are a bad place to work because there's low trust, and you think that you can make it a better place to work by providing armchairs for people to relax in, or by providing a bigger variety of food in the canteen, it doesn't work, because all you're doing is you're adding cost and you're reducing the return to your investors. And you're not making it a better place to work. You're making it a low-trust workplace where people enjoy good food. All right, and that's really important. Like so. Of course, many great workplaces have. Excuse me. Many great workplaces do have very pleasant workplace environments, but the environments are a sign of the respect that the employer has for the people who work there. That's not what's making it a great place to work, and that's really important. So I want to just talk quickly about leadership intentions against day-to-day reality. So if you think about your brand and you talk about your policies, practices, procedures, and these express your leadership's vision, values, principles, and aspirations. So in other words, what you want to be. And then on the other side, you have the reality of how the employee experiences the workplace. So how they experience the workplace shapes their attitudes, their level of engagement, what they want to contribute and what they do actually contribute, their intention to stay with the organization and how productive they are. So it's what we want to be on one side and what we are on the other side. And the question then is, so this is really your employer brand promise, and on the other side, the employer brand reality. And in fact, the reality is your employer brand. You know, let me just see if I can. This is the reality of your brand, whereas this is really your marketing. And again, that's good, because what it means is that when you get it right, the branding and the brand promise and the promotion of that brand begins to look after itself, because you could all name organizations here in Turkey that have reputations as being great places to work. And you may know very little about those, except that you know that they're a good place to work. And that's because of word of mouth. It's just because of the reputation that they have. And remember, we've also got plenty of examples of companies where they make promises and then they're found not to have kept those promises. And the media, understandably, love to find that. They love to find organizations where they say, you know, we're a company you can trust, and then to use examples of how they have not been trusted. So what bridges the gap between what we want to be on one side and what we are on the other side? And the answer is trust is what bridges that gap. That it's the trust in the relationships that translate the ambition into the experience. But as I've said at the beginning, trust is a belief in a person. It's a belief in a person, not a thing, not a company. So therefore, in most cases, when we talk about trusting somebody in work, most employees, for them, it's about trusting their manager. Okay, and it's taken a while to get here, but I wanted to make sure that the role of the manager is understood clearly, because without a manager or managers that fully understand that they control the employee experience, you know, of course there's the thing of, well, as an employee, I have got to contribute. I've got to meet you halfway. But if you don't understand that you must work through your managers, that nothing that you do in your job will count for anything for an employee if your manager is standing in the way. So for example, if you've got a manager who is cynical about the company, who tends to roll her eyes when a new announcement comes out, a new initiative, whether it's something from the chief executive or from HR. So if she says, here, have a look at this, and she gives that to her team, as opposed to somebody who believes it and says, guys, good news, we're doing this from next week, or that manager shapes the experience. They shape whether it's okay to be a company person or whether it's okay to be cynical about the company, to be inside or outside. So what are the alternatives to high trust management? I can only think of one, which is this command and control, which is really, I tell people what to do and then I use systems to manage them. And I use systems and I count the numbers to make sure that they're doing what I tell them to do. And the problem with that is it doesn't work, because the moment that I leave the room, people start doing what they want to do anyway. You know, we talked about it earlier, it's the difference between what's written down and what's actually done. So what's the business case for trust? I want to just very quickly emphasize this before I get to how you achieve this. So the simple statement, the simple position is that the world's best workplaces outperformed their peers on every business metric that counts, without exception. Okay, so really there is no downside to being a great workplace. And I just want to give a few examples here. So this slide here shows the annualized stock market returns between the Fortune 100 Best and two standard indices, which are the Russell 1000. The Russell 1000 is the 1,000 biggest companies on the US stock markets. And the Russell 3000 is about 98% of all the companies that are listed on, I think, the New York Stock Exchange. So over the period from 1998 to 2015, which is 17 years, they achieved an average return of about 6.4%. Had you instead chosen to invest in the best workplaces, the list of companies that we published in Fortune in 1998, and then when we changed the list, because a few companies change every year, you sell your shares in those and buy shares in the new one, you would achieve close to double what was achieved. And that isn't a case of just picking one period. We make a very simple claim, which is there is no period in which the best workplaces have been outperformed by the stock market indices in any country in which it's counted. So it really is that straightforward. So about twice as good. This slide here shows the same information, but on a cumulative basis. And you see, had you invested in 1998, by 2016, your standard stock market exchange, or your standard stock market investment would have grown by about 250%. Your money would have grown by over 700% invested in the best companies. And that's why there's such excitement about great workplaces. Nothing to do with the award ceremonies and the certification and the branding. That's all fun, and it's good, and it helps you to do your job, and it helps you to attract more people. But this is why the great workplace movement is the enduring success that it is, because it's good for business. And what I want to just draw attention to here is, if you look at here and here, you see where it dips. Let me just see if I can use, okay. You see here where it dips. So remember that this shaded area is the best workplaces, and this is the ordinary workplaces. So here's where the stock market took a dip, and here's where it took a dip. And look, the best workplaces took a dip as well in both cases. So it doesn't suggest that best workplaces are immune when there's a downturn in the economy. But what you can see from that is they don't fall as far, and they get back much more quickly. All right, that their ability to recover is much quicker. And the reason their ability to recover is much quicker is because of trust. Because when we have to make changes, if people trust us, they will cooperate with us. And if they don't trust us, if they're suspicious about why we're doing something, then they'll resist. So while the best companies are already on the road to recovery, the ordinary workplaces are still having discussions with employees about how we can make things different, how we can cut our cloth according to our measure. So you would say, well, if this is such a good idea, how come it's not possible to invest in funds that invest only in the best workplaces? And it is actually possible. There's the Parnassus Endeavour Fund, which since 2005 has been doing exactly that. And I'm not going to spend time on it, but again, if you look, you see the same shape. They only invest in companies that have a reputation that stacks up, a reputation as being good to their employees and good for their employees. But again, it's inspired by the work that we've done, which is this idea of creating a great place to work. And you see exactly the same dip there. Look, here's where the fund dipped in the same way as the S&P 500. But look how quickly these companies recover compared to these which limp along for a few years, get things sorted out, a bit of a recovery, and eventually they begin to surge. The best workplaces have this substance behind their brand promise that the other workplaces don't. And that's the evidence of the substance here. That's the reality of what happens when people trust you, is that you can get back on the horse quicker and you can recover the ground that you've lost quicker. Finally, I just want to show voluntary turnover. So this slide shows the voluntary turnover in 2016. It's US data, but we use US data only because it's easily accessed, and we've been working in the US for so long. It's not that it works in the US and doesn't work elsewhere. You'll find this in every country, including here. And what it is basically saying, this is the voluntary turnover in manufacturing and production amongst the best workplaces, and this is amongst their peers. And it's the same in every industry, and it's significantly so in some key industries. And the reason that this is important is that if you can hold on to the people that you've recruited, if you think about the time and effort that you put into recruiting people, when they leave you, you have effectively trained them to go and work for somebody else. And the more time that HR spend in recruiting bodies to fill positions, the less time you have to be strategic, the less time you have to be a strategic partner in the business. So not only is Great Workplace good for everybody else, it's actually very good for HR because it actually frees you to do what you are best at. You know, not the functional nuts and bolts operational HR, but the strategic value-adding HR, which is where you should all want to be. And this slide here just summarizes how it works. So managers shape culture, and culture drives performance. And just how it works is that when you have a great culture, you attract more and better candidates. These same companies are best at bringing out the best in people because when we work somewhere where we feel appreciated and valued, we stay longer. And the longer we stay, the more productive we become because we know what we're doing, we know the people in the organization, we know who to ask for something. We become more innovative because we have more courage in bringing our ideas forward and in making suggestions about how things might be done better. Customers like dealing with companies like this. And the bottom line then, as our reputation grows, it all adds together into great results. And the idea is it's this upward spiral where everything becomes better. And just before I come to the rules then, the big question is, so are great workplaces great because they perform well, or do they perform well because they're great workplaces? The chicken or the egg. So there's a really simple answer, which is, we can all think of many organizations that look like great workplaces. So when you look at what their brand is, when you look at their offering, it looks like it should be good. So they pay competitive rates, they have nice office facilities, they have good social life for employees, and yet you know from talking to people, or maybe you work there yourself, they're lousy places to work. So straight away you could say, well, therefore it's not really the benefits that make it a great place to work. Okay, but there is also independent research conducted by a guy called Alex Edmonds, which establishes firmly, it's referenced in the book, but it establishes firmly that culture predates performance. So treating people well causes the business to perform better. It doesn't work the other way around. Okay, so the rules. So the reason that I've talked more about the background to the rules than the rules themselves is the rules are unbelievably simple. You know, you don't need 45 minutes to talk about the rules. You'll notice that the book is a very small book. And it's a small book because I wanted to write a book that would be read, rather than a book that would make my mother proud. And in fact, she's proud anyway, so my son, the author. I initially set out, what I originally had in mind was, I asked for access to the Great Place to Work database, which is a database of, for 1 year, 2 million employees in 80 countries around the world, all answering the same 57 questions, the trust index that you guys are familiar with. And what I originally wanted to do was, I wanted to explore what are the differences from one country to another, and maybe from gender, or from age, or from generation, in how we trust somebody else. Okay, and that's what the book was going to be about. So the book was going to be about how people in Turkey use different measures to trust people than people in Ireland. Or how women maybe are slower to trust, and maybe men are quicker to trust. And what I actually found was, there's no difference. There's absolutely no difference by gender, there's absolutely no difference by age, there's no difference whether you're Generation X or a baby boomer or Gen Y or anything else. We all trust people in work the same way as we trust people outside of work, and the things that we use, the factors that we use to decide whether we trust somebody or not, are the same as we've probably been using for 5,000 or 10,000 years. So the first thing in a relationship is somebody has to make the first move. Somebody has to trust first. And as managers, we instinctively say, well, you know, if my team would just act trustworthy, then I would find it easy to trust them. But the reality is managers are paid to make things happen. So to make trust happen, you have to start by extending trust. Same as any other personal relationship, that if you are the first to reach out, then it makes it easier for the other person. Remember, in the manager-employee relationship, the manager has all of the power as far as the employee is concerned. So if I'm the manager, it's easier for me to trust you than it is for you to trust me. Because if I trust you and you let me down, I have loads of things that I can do. You know, I can punish you. I can not trust you again. I can sack you. But if you're the employee and you trust me and I let you down, what can you do? You know, you have no sanction against me other than, I suppose, to take your talent and perform on a different stage. So it's easier for a manager to trust first, and that is actually the hardest thing to do. But it's not negotiable, it has to be done. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the other 15 rules, and in each case I've shown the number that's on the slide is the score that is being achieved by the world's best workplaces on this rule. Okay, so it's the 25 best workplaces in the world, which is going to be announced at the end of November, at the end of October, but I'm using the data from the 2017 list. So it's the most up-to-date data that we have. And what's relevant about it is, I want you to appreciate that, so these 25, the best companies in the world, don't get it right all of the time. And often I think as managers, or as trusted employees of an organization, I think we often feel that if we don't get it right all of the time, that we're not getting it right. And the human condition is, you can't get it right all the time. You know, at any one time, if we were a company and you were all the employees, or we're all the employees, in this room there are people who are unhappy because of things that are happening in their life. They're unhappy because of things that are happening in their career. They're unhappy because maybe their mother is sick, or they have a child who's sick, or a child who's not doing well at school, or a dog who's got teeth problem. And we all bring those things with us to work. So it's unreasonable to expect that you're ever going to achieve 100%. And the reason I want to share these numbers is to say, that's the best that the best companies can do. So go easy on yourselves, and don't accept that just because you can only get 70% or 60%. If you're at 60 and you can get to 62%, that's still better. And Ayob talked earlier about they introduced the concept of great place to work for all. And the aspiration is that your workplace should be a great workplace for everybody that works there. But it never actually will be, because that's perfection, and we're human, so we can't achieve perfection. But anyway, that's why I want to share the number with you. And you'll be surprised, I think, at how low some of the numbers are. But remember, these are the results being achieved by the world's best workplaces. And I think that should give you great hope and inspiration about what you can do in your own organization. So this rule, live with integrity, is really just saying your values are non-negotiable. And this is something that the world's best workplaces tend to be strong at. And the reason, it's logical if you think about it, because if you don't live with integrity, if you're not living with integrity, then people see through it. It's an easy one to fail, and it's one it's about who you are rather than about who you pretend to be. Keeping your promises is the most highly correlated statement. So when I did my research, what I found was that for every 20 people who say, my manager keeps her promises, 19 of them will say, this is a great place to work. And for every 20 people who say, my manager does not keep her promises, 18 of them will say, this is not a great place to work. And if you think about that, and this really, you know, if you had to pick one rule and focus on it, this is the one to focus on, because people who don't keep their promises can't be trusted because they're unreliable. There is more to trust than simply keeping your promises, because you can promise to beat your staff about the head every morning with a stick and do it. I don't recommend that you do. So you would be reliable and trustworthy, but it's not necessarily a good thing. Definitely not a good thing. What I found from talking to employees was, like, so I talk to managers and they say, keep my promises, of course I do. And I've never met or spoken to a manager who has admitted that they're bad at keeping their promises. And that, I think, is because managers tend to think of promises as being big things. So I pay you on time, I give you a performance appraisal on time, when you ask for time off, you're allowed to take it. We promote fairly and so on. But when you talk to employees and you say, well, does your manager keep her promises? They'll say the big things, yeah, but the small things, no. And it's small things like, for example, I'll give you an answer this afternoon, or give me 5 minutes to think about it. And when I say give me 5 minutes to think about it, what I'm really saying is, oh, whatever. I'm not actually saying, okay, so from now I'll be back to you in 5 minutes' time. But the person who hears that, hears it as a promise that I will give an answer in 5 minutes. So one of the things that I say in the book is just a really simple thing. The way to break less promises is to make less promises. Because most of us, we're nice people, we like to please people. So when somebody asks us for something, we often overpromise. So we'll say, I'll have that for you tomorrow. Whereas actually, if we said, when do you need this? Maybe they would say, I need it by the end of the week or by the end of the month. Okay, so and the book is, the focus of the book is entirely on talking about these small things that will hopefully surprise you about your own behavior. That you think of yourself as being reliable, you think of yourself as being somebody that does what you say you do, because, it would be a pretty uncomfortable place to feel that you're somebody that breaks all these rules. But the reality is that nobody is getting it right all of the time. That means as a manager, you're not getting it right all of the time. And the good news is that it's only about being a bit better today, doing one thing differently today than you did yesterday. So keeping one more promise. Okay. Another one, be approachable and easy to talk to. And the main point that I want to make about this is there's a big difference between being approachable and you approaching people. So if you're the manager and you have the power in the relationship, so if I stroll over to you guys and I say, so how are you all today, and any news, and how was your holiday? That's not the same as you feeling comfortable to come to me if you have something you want to talk to me about. Okay, so, and that's why I use the picture of somebody on a throne, that you've got to be down there, you've got to be accessible and approachable, and that's as much to do with body language. It's as much, it's not to do with having an open door policy, because again, I've never heard any company say we have a closed door policy. We sort of keep the doors closed to keep the people out. Like, everybody has an open door policy. But when the door is open and you go in and somebody is fiddling with their phone as they're listening to you, or they're peering over your shoulder, or they're glancing at the screen, they're all the things that are saying, you're not actually that important to me. And these are the things that break trust. It's not, and that's the key thing that I want to leave you with today. It's nothing big. There's no big problem to be solved. It's all these little things. So people say, well, I'm sort of more of a shy person, and I find it hard to do all this people stuff. You'll often hear that. So there's a couple of simple solutions. One is find another job. If you're in a job where you're managing people, you have to do it. Your personality is a feature of who you are. It's not an excuse for who you are. So if you're responsible for managing people and you're not up to the job, then you need to find something else to do. Find a way to do it, or find some, be successful in some other role. It's not about becoming something that you're not. That's really important. It's about being who you are and allowing your true personality to shine forward. So being authentic, because if you're pretending to be something, people see through that. So if you're shy and slightly antisocial and you find conversations awkward, don't try to pretend that you don't, but have the conversations anyway. And people will say, my boss is a bit strange, he's a little bit eccentric, He doesn't really seem to get all this people stuff, but he really does his best, and I know that his heart is in the right place. So it's about not hiding behind excuses. Giving straight answers. And again, like if you look at the numbers on these, like 82%, that means even in the world's best workplaces, 4 out of 5 employees say, my manager sometimes, so remember, we count positive scores. So 82% means people have said it's usually the case or almost always the case. So even in the best workplaces, 1 in 5 people has said, my manager gives straight answers, sometimes yes, sometimes no. These are really achievable scores. Like, these are not difficult scores. And by the way, when you think about your trust index score, which is your, the verdict of your employees on the whole company, remember, it's the sum of all of these. So if you're doing badly on, I can ask management any question and get a straight answer, or a reasonable question and get a straight answer. If you're doing badly on that, you're doing badly because your managers are doing badly on it. So if you are working with Great Place to Work and you look at your trust index scores, so management seek and respond to suggestions and ideas. If that's what you're doing badly on it because your managers are doing badly on it. And the answer lies in getting your managers to do something more constructive about it. So I'm not going to go through the rules, rule by rule, because that's what the book does. But the main point that I want to make to you is that these are all simple concepts. There's nothing guru-like about anything that I have to say, because it's only about being human and being decent and allowing your humanity to shine through in everything that you do, and thinking about the person that you're dealing with, seeing them as a person rather than simply somebody who's in a position. And again, make your expectations clear. 4 out of 5 people who work in the world's best workplaces say, my manager sometimes does and sometimes doesn't make their expectations clear. And remember, these are all successful organizations, so they're incredibly successful, although they're only performing at about 80, 85, 90% of their potential. So imagine what you could achieve with even a 1% improvement in performance. A 1% improvement in how people feel about their workplace will result in a percentage increase in your performance. I've no idea what it will be, but your business will not perform your business will not perform worse because people feel that they're welcomed. And this show a warm welcome, I'm coming up against the clock now, but one thing I just want to say, so my eldest daughter is 28. I know many of you are thinking I must have been married when I was 8 or 9. I know many of you are thinking I must have been married when I was 8 or 9. Okay, my eldest girl is 28. And she went through college, got her good degree and so on, and then she went to work for a high-tech company who spent 3 months recruiting her. So they would be one of the top 5 or top 10 tech companies. They put a lot of effort into recruiting her, and she showed up for work on the first day and nobody was expecting her. So she sat in the reception area for 2 hours. Various people came and went and they had conversations and they looked at her and then they disappeared. And then she was eventually brought upstairs and told to sit at this desk. And at this stage she needed to go to the bathroom because, we need to go to the bathroom. But she was terrified to go, A, in case somebody came looking for her, and B, in case she got locked outside. You know when you go through the door and you don't have a swipe? So she sat there for another hour or so, and it was an absolutely horrible experience. She got her name badge that was on the Monday, she got her name badge on the Friday, she got a desk on the Friday, so she was just hanging around for a week. And at the end of that week, she started looking for another job, and she left within 3 months. And when you think about all the time and expense that company went to look for her, and to find her, and then to lose her within minutes of her arriving. So again, in the book, I say just simple things like don't start somebody at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning if that's a busy time. Start them at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Why do we always have to make these things happen at the same time? But don't look surprised when they show up. Make sure they have a desk, make sure they have a badge, make sure that people know to expect them. It's all this simple stuff because that shapes our view of the company. So in Kathy's case, she came face to face with an employer brand that had been strong enough to want her to go and work for them, and yet weak enough that it all unraveled within 10 minutes. And it's just such a waste of money and such a waste of effort. Okay, nobody's job is just anything. This idea that if somebody says to you, if you say, what do you do? And they say, I'm just a clerk, I'm just a cleaner, I'm just a brain surgeon. If they say, I'm just a brain surgeon, don't let them operate on you. But when somebody says, my job is just something, that suggests that they don't value the work the way that you should. So whatever their job, if somebody has a job that is really invaluable, that has no value, then they probably shouldn't be in your company in the first place. So if somebody's doing a job, it's because it's needed, and everybody should know why they're needed. And again, I talk about that a bit more. So I just want to, as I say, the rules are in the book. They're all common sense. Get to know the whole person, because these are people who are, and by the way, I can make a copy of the presentation available as well, so you have both sides. Helping your employees achieve work-life balance. Just the main point I'd make here, many companies seem to think that work-life balance is about kids, and it's about having time, making sure that people who have childcare responsibilities are able to balance that. And one of the things that I hear most often is from people who don't have kids, but who care for somebody else, like maybe an elderly relative or a neighbour, but the companies tend not to put the same value on that care. I know from our research, 1 in 11 people cares for somebody who is not a child. Okay, so if you have 100 people, so 1 out of every 11 people has care responsibilities beyond that are not child related. So one of the things I hear most often is people saying, I don't mind my colleagues having work-life balance, but I do object that they get work-life balance at my expense, because it's often the person who doesn't have kids who gets asked to come in early, stay home, stay late, come in at the weekend, keep an eye out for something, and so on. If somebody has a dog that's sick, I'm not a dog lover. We have a dog at home, and I like her. But there are dog lovers, there are cat lovers for whom, if the dog is sick, it's as serious or more serious than for a parent whose child is sick. So who are we then to say, well, that's less important in terms of work-life balance? If you want to get home to walk your dog, that's actually as important as collecting your kid from the creche, to you. So it's about this idea about understanding the needs of all of your employees, for all, not just the needs of a simple group. Very important point, do what you're paid to do. If you're not competent at your job, nobody can trust you. So go back to the brain surgeon again. A brain surgeon might be very reliable, dependable, trustworthy, and so on. But if he's no good as a brain surgeon, there's a bit of a problem there for the brain surgeon and for the patient. So you've got to be competent. That's really table stakes. Do what you're paid to do. And have fun together. And would anybody like to hazard a guess? Of the countries that we work with in Europe, which country has the highest score for this is a fun place to work? Germany. So how is that? And you think about that. Well, actually, I'll tell you, it makes sense when you think about it, because we think of fun at work as being maybe the boss dressing up in a clown suit, or, I don't know, throwing sponges at each other, or playing tricks on each other, or whatever. Fun at work is actually none of those things. Like, it's a very American idea, a very Americanized idea of fun, which does not sit well in Europe. We tend to be much more cynical about, well, certainly we tend to be much more cynical about most things than West Coast America. And a lot of the initial moves on Great Place to Work would have originated with West Coast American companies. So this idea of fun at work is just the freedom to be yourself. Okay, it's the freedom to not have to pretend to be somebody else at work. That if you want to say something funny, that you can stop what you're doing, make your little remark and go back to what you're doing, and that's okay. And so if you think about the German personality, where things are very logical and on or off and so on, it actually begins to make sense that the freedom to be yourself is something that you would enjoy in a German workplace. And that's really important. Like, when people talk about having fun at work, it's not the organized fun. It's what happens in their team when there's been a really tense moment and somebody says something funny and everybody laughs. Or somebody has had a meltdown and you wait and then you say something about it. and it's how they react. Like, it's fun at work is like fun at home. It's fun when you're having your meals. It's fun when you're in the car together. It's, you know, because we're the same people outside of work as we are at home. And it all adds up to being a great place to work. There are just a couple of points I want to leave you with. So the first thing is, you can't make a great place to work for anybody else. Okay, that's really important. You cannot make a great place to work for anybody else. Corporately, you can create a culture in which a great place to work can flourish. So you can create fertile ground. Your managers can behave in a way that will allow people, if they wish to, have a good workplace experience. But not everybody enters into that. There are some people who just, for whatever reason, they won't meet you halfway. They won't embrace the great place to work concept. And you know, if there's a second book, it's probably about the responsibilities that go with being in a great place to work, because most people don't work in great workplaces, and those who do, I think, have a responsibility to their employer. You know, a responsibility to embrace it and to be appreciative for what the company is trying to do. So you can't make a great place to work, but you can make a lousy place for everybody else all on your own. HR can destroy the culture in the company easily just by making it impossible for a positive culture to take place. And the bad manager can create a toxic team entirely on his own. So you can't make it for somebody else, but you can destroy it for everybody else. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's just really to remind you, it's not what you do, it's why you do it that counts. So it's not the flowers that make the relationship, it's the feeling behind the flowers. You know, so a daisy picked from a field is a more precious gift to somebody who feels loved than the biggest bouquet of flowers. And it is a great place to work. So as we said earlier, Disneyland is a great place, and that's where we go for pure fun, but we go to work to be productive and, you know, to give and so on. And again, in the book, I consider this issue that sometimes some people sometimes have a difficulty in understanding the boundary between the great place and the work. You know, they can sometimes embrace the fun culture or the relaxing culture a bit too much. But that's about management. That's competent management saying, well, that's not actually the case. You know, you need to pull your weight. And finally, be the change that you want to see in the world. So whether this is you as managers or you thinking about other managers in your company, the way that you change the experience of your team is by changing yourself. And by taking one single thing and doing it differently for 30 days. So for example, you could say, okay, I'm going to simply think more before I make a promise. And I'm going to do that every day for 30 days. And that's about typically how long it takes to break a habit and make a habit and so on. But the point I'm making is be authentic and be yourself, because if you try to be anything other than yourself, people see through that. So you have to find what works for you. But you already do, because assuming that you have reasonably good family relationships and a couple of close friends, you're already expert at building trust. You just have to take what you do outside of work and bring it to work with you. And that's it. Good luck, and thank you for your attention.